Hello, my name is Bite, and welcome to my little corner of the internet where I just talk about swords and putting LEDs into everything because that's what I like to do. And occasionally LEDs on me. I'm still thinking of another cosplay to do that. I have a few. Just wait and see. So, welcome back to part 2. I've had most of this edited for the past few months. I just never got around to finishing it and uploading it because procrastination. But to be fair, not just procrastination. I've just been really, really busy lately. So yay, dealing with stuff, adulting, yay. And I'm here to tell you it's completely okay to remake a part of your cosplay. And that's kind of how I ended up with 2 staffs. There were just a few things on my first version that I did not like, especially since I wasn't looking at a reference when I 3D modeled it. I know, rookie mistake, but it's okay. I learned a lot from this build, and my second build is so much better. And now I get to share it with you. There's a lot of things that when you're building a prop that you just don't know about or don't think about in the future. And that's why I kind of like watching tutorials to see things that I might miss myself. Now, I do want to give out huge props to the Cosplay Tutorial Challenge. Now, what this is it's a global cosplay contest that encourages cosplayers to make tutorials. Now, the team behind this is amazing. There's so much work that goes into building something like this, and it's amazing for cosplayers to encourage us to start making tutorials again. And that's kind of why I'm back here. So thank you to everyone in that area that is working really hard behind the scenes and getting this all done. They keep every single tutorial that has ever been entered on their website. So now this website has become such an amazing resource for us. So I highly, highly suggest going to look at this, go follow them on Instagram and give them their support. It's absolutely incredible to see just how many more tutorials that you guys have been entering year to year. There is one more thing that we need to talk about before we can get started, and that is safety. Please wear the appropriate mask and please wear the appropriate gloves that work for the chemical that you are using. Please remember, glasses are not a safety device. Stuff can go under or up top, so please wear the appropriate goggles. Please, I love cosplay, but it doesn't mean that you should be harming yourself for it. And now with that, let's get on with the video. First, let's set up the slicer. Since we've already modeled hollow sections into our 3D design, there's no need for anything too special here. The key setting to update is the outer wall count. We designed this to be about 6 loops thick, so adjust it accordingly. This removes the need for any infill within the model. Why is this so important? Well, if we're using clear filament and planning to light it from within, any infill pattern will be visible and affect the light distribution. For example, as you can see in this test print, I forgot to turn on the setting, and the pattern is clearly visible when it's lit up. So remember, the only piece we want with the infill is the bottom section where the electronics are going. Now for the supports. Since the top swirl has an indent for the handle, there's an inner section that will need support. The slicer software will also want to add support at the very top, but due to the shape and small opening, it would be tough to remove. Knowing my machines, I'm confident an overhang like this can print without support. Although the inside might not look perfect, it won't be noticeable once the LEDs are on, unlike the infill patterns. Now for the supports. Because the top swirl has an indent for the handle, there's an intersection that will need support. The slicer software will also want to add support at the very top, but due to the shape and small opening, it would be tough to remove. Knowing my machines, I'm confident an overhang like this can print without support. Although the inside might not look perfect, it won't be noticeable once the LEDs are on, unlike the infill patterns. It's time to use your slicer support blocking tool to remove any support at the very top, and you're ready to start printing. Both handles will work the same and should have 6 outer wall lines, and I definitely recommend sticking with 6. Anything less won't provide enough thickness to prevent bending when holding the prop. You can test print different thicknesses if you want to explore other options, but 6 is a solid choice. Now, let's move on to the bottom section. The infill and outer wall lines will remain the same as usual. You can block off the area where the battery sits at the top, as 3D printers should be able to handle that overhang. Plus, removing supports from a small opening like this can be quite challenging. The other area that needs attention is where the sliding mechanism comes into play. Due to its irregular shape, this section requires support. I decided to add my own support along the edge just to assist with the overhang. I prefer the mechanism to be a bit tighter than usual, as I like to use a heat gun to warm it up before sliding the two pieces together for a snug fit. This just ensures that the bottom piece won't be loose. Since both the top and bottom pieces need support, and the area is quite small and awkward, cleaning out the supports can be nearly impossible. The heat gun method always does the trick for me. I perform this on both pieces before assembling them to ensure everything fits together smoothly. Now that we have all the pieces printed, it's time to assemble them. Since this is a shorter staff, the only piece we needed to slice in half was the middle handle. To create a strong bond, we'll melt the two halves together using additional filament. Be sure to use the same. To melt the pieces together, I prefer using a soldering iron with a flat tip. The flat tip allows for melting. You'll also need the same filament that you use for your original print. And please, you're melting plastic, please wear the proper protection. This is a perfect opportunity to make use of those pesky ends of filament rolls that you can never seem to use up. Normally, I don't use super glue for bonding, as melting plastic and super glue is even more toxic. However, in situations like this, where I want to achieve a flush fit, I will use glue. I also use masking tape to hold everything in place. Use your thumbs to help align the two pieces for a perfect flush fit. When heating up the soldering iron, ensure the tip is clean, as any debris can transfer to the print. I suggest to start below that recommended temperature of the filament that you used and gradually increase it until you find a setting that can melt the plastic without burning it. If you accidentally burn the plastic, you can try melting it again and wiping or cutting away the built-up plastic. But this can be challenging and may cause extra sanding later on. Take your time and proceed with caution during this process. Before, I used to apply X's along my joints, but I found that method harder to flatten and more labor intensive. Now I've adopted a technique similar to what welders use, a single V-groove weld. Essentially, we create a bevel on both pieces and fill it in with additional filament. The V shape allows for a deeper penetration and increases the surface area, which allows more filament to be added, which results in a stronger bond, which we kind of need. I still prefer using a 3D printed pen to melt the extra filament into the V-groove. While a pen isn't necessary, I like it because the filament is already melted when it comes out, making it easier and much faster to flatten the excess. Since the filament is pre-melted, I find it adds significant strength to the joint as well. Just remember, we're melting plastic with a tiny soldering iron, so this is not a quick process. Take it nice and slow. If there's any excess filament, push it to one area, and once it cools, you can easily snip it off. Be cautious with the heat, as too much in one spot can cause the print to melt inward, leaving a divot. Keep your soldering iron moving, and never leave it in the same place for too long. Continue moving around the handle a few times until you're satisfied with the bond. Allow the print to cool for a few minutes, then go ahead with a round of sanding. If you notice any high points, you can melt them down again. Since this will be coated with resin, minor imperfections will be filled in, but if there's larger bumps, it's best to smooth them out now to avoid excessive sanding once the resin is applied. And then you can keep repeating this as many times as you wish until you get it as flat as you want it. Before moving on to the XCC3D, it's time to ensure that the handle and bottom ball fit snugly. I encountered a minor issue because I forgot to enable supports, so I had to heat it up a little bit more. After warming it up and working the print back and forth, I achieved a secure, tight-fitting joint that won't move. Now that all the pieces are ready, it's time for XCC3D, which is a liquid epoxy coating used to smooth and finish 3D printing models, adding durability and a glossy finish. It's effective for filling in the layer lines common in FDM prints, reducing the need for sanding. Most important, XCC3D dries clear, which is essential for this build, as using filler primer or Bondo, which are both opaque, would interfere with the LED lighting inside. Many cosplayers are not fans of XCC3D, largely because it's tricky to work with and often requires practice to get the best results. First things first, wear gloves and a respirator when working with resin. Although XCC3D is less toxic than some other resin brands, it's still important to handle it safely. Avoid getting it on your skin or work surface. Always cover your work area with paper, as the resin takes some time to cure. The first step is mixing. Begin by preparing a tinfoil lined container, as we'll need it shortly. XCC3D is a 2-part resin, generally mixed at 2 parts resin to 1 part hardener. I use clear medicine cups for measuring, marking the levels needed for each part. While you can use a scale for precise measurements, I usually eyeball it and I haven't had any issues. Mix well for a few minutes, making sure to scrape the sides and bottom well. Once fully combined, pour the mixture into the tinfoil lined container. As the resin mixes, it produces heat through a thermal reaction, which can melt plastic cups, making the tinfoil container essential. Now you can start applying the resin to the print. Use a foam brush to lightly coat the surface with resin. Light coats work best as the resin is self-leveling and can pool in certain areas. To avoid buildup, it's ideal to hang the prop on something like a cheap clothes hanger. Hanging allows excess resin to drip off, but you should still check back on the print for the first 5 to 10 minutes after applying to wipe away any excess. The number of drips to manage depends on the print's design. Complex shapes with many nooks, like the swirl at the top of the staff, tend to collect resin pools. I let the first layer cure for about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the temperature, and then apply 3 to 4 additional layers, adding more if a joint needs extra support. You'll likely go through around 3 to 4 foam brushes, and I keep a clean one on hand to wipe away any excess resin during application. The leaflet included with the XTC 3D suggests a drying time of around 4 hours, but I let it cure for a full 24 hours after the final layer. Once it's completely hardened, it's safe to touch and ready for sanding. Now it's time to sand. Yes, you still need to sand XTC 3D because it leaves a shiny finish, and paint doesn't adhere well to glossy surfaces. The sanding process is similar to what you do with filler primer, but be careful not to oversand the print, as it's easy to remove too much of the resin you just applied. Since the resin has already filled in most of the layer lines, you won't need to sand extensively, just enough to eliminate any shiny high spots. You can also sand down any raised areas or drips left by the XTC 3D. Use coarse grit for high spots or drips, and then use 120 to 180 grit for the rest of the surface. Keep in mind that resin is harder, so you may need to replace your sandpaper more frequently. I'll cover sanding and painting techniques in more detail in upcoming videos, so be sure to subscribe. Now, wet sand using 400 grit sandpaper, and then apply a clear coat. After that, wet sand the clear coat to achieve an even smoother finish. I'm using a clear coat as a base primer because I've tested a few other options and found this to be the most cost-effective and effective choice. If you have any recommendations for like a clear coat, please let me know. I often find it kind of challenging to source materials where I live as well. I forgot to include the steps for applying clear coat and wet sanding, but I made sure to do that within the second version. As you can see, many of the imperfections in the second step have disappeared, so that extra step is definitely worth it. Now, let's talk about painting. If you plan to do a lot of LED work, investing in an airbrush is a great idea. It provides a fine mist that ensures a smooth, even application of paint or coatings, which is especially important when working with transparent or translucent materials. This technique allows for better light diffusion and helps to avoid any patchiness. Airbrushes aren't just for props, they can be used for a variety of techniques to elevate your cosplay. You can use them to paint fabrics, create gradients, add shading and designs, and detail armor. They may seem intimidating at first, but they're definitely worth the time to learn. When painting, you'll find there are many types of airbrush paint. For LEDs to shine through, it's essential to use transparent colors. Opaque colors can work if applied very lightly, but transparent paints are always the best choice. Now it's time for the LED talk. For this build, I use Adafruit components to bring it all together. The setup is powered by the Adafruit Feather M4 Express and the Adafruit PropMaker Featherwing, paired with NeoPixels and a 2200 mAh battery. I've included links in the description below to step-by-step guides that show you how to solder all the connections together. And regarding the code, I did write it entirely from scratch, so that's something that I don't feel comfortable sharing with. This build features an on and off switch to power the chips and a button to control the LEDs. The chip includes a built-in accelerometer, allowing it to detect motion and change colors based on your movements. It can also produce sound effects. While I often go for a sparkly effect, this time it's coded kind of for my axe right now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I really hope you guys picked up a few more things. I will be going into more in-depth information about each of these sections, and I will be adding more videos about just cosplay related things. So if you have any ideas, if you want to see anything, please leave them down below and I will do my best to get to them. I'm really excited to bring in some of these cosplayers to really talk about some of these things. I have been working on a lot of different things, so don't you worry. A lot of things are coming up and ready for more LEDs. So yeah, click that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Oh, wait. Let's look at the staff. I forgot about that. Play it. Hit play. I really need to make a smaller prop so I don't have to hold this thing. 10 points if you know who this is from.